travelers. I'm Matt from Fear Frontier. Once again, podcasting to you from this haunted brothel for what is Fear Frontier, the podcast. And tonight's episode is brought to you by that little sensation you get that something is chasing you back to your bedroom after you turn the hall light off. But I, of course, do not do this podcast all alone, for I'm here once again with my conjured crew of conjurers, Fear Frontier.
This is Michael.
I'm Chloe.
And I'm Riley.
And tonight, we're going to discuss something that, if I'm being a little bit honest, hits a little close to home. When I say close to home, I mean right outside the door. Tonight, we're going to talk about the infamous Superstition Mountains, one of the most beautiful, unique, and even cursed mountain ranges in the entire world. But are they actually cursed? Well, we're glad you stopped by tonight, viewers, because this is exactly what we will discuss tonight. If these mountains are cursed, a few true stories about them, and maybe even a bit of the paranormal as well. Firstly, though, before we continue, just in case you are wondering how close we actually are to these haunted mountains, allow me to introduce the two of you. So follow me. Alright, so there's the bordello that we're recording in. There's the Superstition Mountain. So what are some of the reasons that these mountains might actually be cursed? Well, there's a lot of legends that discuss curses being set up by the Native Americans that roam the land even to this day, and also the fact that, I don't know, dozens of calls of missing people and rescue teams go out there every single year. Or maybe because this curse stems far beyond just the range of the mountain, but in fact the entire 160,000 acres of desert that surrounds that mountain. And of course, in this cursed desert, we are now recording right in the middle of it. But it isn't just people that go missing in these mountains. Strange stories of legends and gold to this day. Prospectors going missing, as well as hikers, mysterious apparitions, and even an odd amount of decapitations. Which leads me into, before discussing this openly, introducing the fifth member of tonight's podcast. Because after all, 5 heads are better than 4. So, we're going to prepare to actually discuss about these infamous Superstition Mountains. But also something else that's kind of fun. They didn't know I was going to do this before we get into some of the legends and stories and folklore of the place. I actually came across something that I thought was kind of interesting, and I thought I would share as a group. So, have you ever heard of this book series, Missing on the Superstition Mountain? This is actually a trilogy of young adult kid stories that actually involve going missing in the Superstition Mountains. And what's actually really cool about these, and I unironically want to read them.
These kids are terrified.
They are. These stories literally are about where we are now. They call it Superstition Town, I believe.
That's horrifying.
Which is literally Apache Junction where we are. You can tell when you read it because I've read the first few chapters of the first book. They're literally about us. These stories take place literally where we are now.
The tagline on the first book says, "Once you climb up the mountain, you may never come down." And
exactly.
That's the theme for tonight.
There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
It is, and it's fascinating because these are written, and this is not endorsed in any way. An author by the name of Elise Broach wrote these. And several other stories, including a very famous young adult book called Masterpiece. She's actually written several of these, and I came across these and thought they might be fun to talk about because this shows you how far the legends reach. It's actually inspired a well-selling, critically acclaimed trilogy for young adults, and it's fascinating because I swear we are in these stories. The locations, the town, the places that these kids go and what they see, they're literally describing our own backyards.
That's crazy.
I love that.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be fun just to sort of pull them out
read
and,
those.
you know, kind of, yeah. I'm not even kidding. I look forward to reading these.
Yeah, really. I'm going to go to Bookman's or something.
Yeah.
And grab me those.
Now, what's really going to be interesting is reading those stories and be like, hey, that sounds very familiar to something that happened, you know, in the past. Cause
I already recognized the name on the back cover of the third book. I was like, hey!
Yeah.
We know that.
I researched that person.
Exactly. So,
Nice.
and this actually leads us into one of the first points we're going to make, is that these stories are going to sound like something out of fiction, out of folklore, out of horror movies and nightmares, but they're not. It's kind of like in movies when there's always that trope that never gets old about the person driving their car down a lone highway at night, gas tank's low or engine trouble, and they pull off to the nearest gas station and they say, hey, I'm looking for this town or this location in the Superstition Mountains, and the guy behind the counter, why you wanna go there? And like, you know, beneath the burning fluorescent lights, and it's all, you know, ambiguous and everything, and it's just, that's actually us. That is literally where we live. If somebody were to ask me about going up the Superstition Mountain, and I looked at him and was actually like, why you wanna go there? It would actually be legit. Like, that's what happens here.
we've heard the stories, we've read the stories, and you guys have been here long enough, and you've seen the helicopters going to rescue people.
This week, there's actually been a rescue chopper 3 days in a row.
Wow.
Circling that mountain. We'll be at work here in the town of Goldfield, Arizona, where our ghost tour takes place. You'll be going about your day, and then all of a sudden, you'll look up, and it'll be going around the front of that mountain, and that giant mountain looking right like down on that helicopter. It looks like a toy in front of it, and customers like, what's going on? And me and myself or some others that work in the town, oh, another one's lost. They're looking for another one. It's so commonplace, but it's terrifying. So tonight, viewers, the Superstition Mountains are our topic. Are they actually haunted? Are they actually cursed? Is there gold hidden in them? Are the legends true? We're going to discuss some of that tonight, and we hope you can form an opinion for yourselves. But firstly, why is the mountain cursed? There is a story, of course. So as you may or may not know, we're in the town of Goldfield, Arizona. Just outside the door of the brothel that we are recorded in is the town of Goldfield, a town that was once thriving in the 1890s. Because, I mean, in the deserts of Arizona, there's very few things that are going to bring people out here in a time like the 1890s, and even less is going to get them to stay. But Goldfield, it's in the name. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of worth in gold buried beneath it. And throughout the decade of the 1890s, men risked their lives coming out here to live in the desert, half of them in tarp tents right out there in the desert, for a chance to get under the ground and pull gold out at $20 an ounce. Seems great. A lot of men got rich. But there's one catch. The town is built at the foot of the Superstition Mountains. The Superstition Mountains are sacred to the Apache tribes and the Yavapai that roam the area for centuries. It's their desert, so men going into these mountains looking for gold, digging holes, blasting holes, it's like going into their church and just blowing it to smithereens. Now, they were not immediately attacked when this happened. They actually were warned to leave. They said, this land is sacred, it's ours, go somewhere else. Greed took over. The men didn't listen. In October 1893, they began digging what would become the Mammoth Mine. The irony is, though, Or is it irony that 5 years later exactly, in October 1897, the mine's flooded? Of all the things that could have stopped them from digging in the desert water, they struck an aquifer 1,058 feet in the ground. The aquifer sent a river rushing through the mine shaft, and these men had no choice but to drop what they were doing and run for their lives. Now, the good news is for them, most if not all did get out alive. The bad news is, left behind, the mines are flooded to the surface, and no one has been able to get into where the gold is at since. Now, is that a coincidence? Is that a curse? I don't know, but they should have listened. And this once rich, thriving town is a ghost town, literally. Now, the mountain, as the Apaches roamed it, it was divided between the Tonto Apache, the Yavapai, as well as a sub-tribe of the Yavapai, forgive me if I don't say this correctly, but the Quevcapeya. They worshiped the mountain that they called the Kaketektamai, which means Crooked Mountain. We know it as the Superstition Mountains, but they worshipped it because their god, the Thunder God, resides in that mountain and guards a literal portal to hell. To them, the mountain is sacred and should never be tampered with, tarnished. But these men go in there and disrespect it. So naturally, this is going to make the tribes in that mountain angry. So between them and that thunder god, a curse is placed on not only the mountain, but the entire desert that surrounds it. Has a curse upon it that says, anyone who perishes, dies within the 160,000 acres of this desert, that their soul is forced to dwell there forever, like a prisoner in torment. Almost as if they were saying, oh, you want to be here after we tell you to leave? Fine, you've got it. You can stay here as long as you'd like. And nobody escapes the desert. Now, over the centuries, the town of Goldfield has accumulated countless spirits, everyone from miners and prospectors, all the way to, unfortunately, those that have lost their lives on the highways, in the skies. This town is now haunted and cursed. So to this day, ourselves, the residents that live within the town, the guests that come to visit it, all of them have seen or heard something that tells them this place is haunted. So the history's true, and the legends are true. And now tonight, we're gonna take you into some details on these legends and stories to show you how real they are, with actual historical proof, as well as possible paranormal evidence. So, Chapter 1. The legends are true. Now, of course, these stories don't just pertain to history from centuries ago. I mean, a curse wouldn't really mean much if it wasn't still going on today. There's plenty evidence of this, including things that happened extremely recently.
I looked down for a moment, and when I looked up, he was gone. That is what an Arizona man told deputies about the disappearance of his nephew, Khaymen Welch. He vanished in that tranquil, beautiful spot, now the site of a desperate search and rescue.
Imagine you're with some family. Your uncle comes to Arizona for the first time and you want to take him hiking into the Superstition Mountains. And you're out there and you're hiking and you're having a really good time taking pictures and just enjoying the beauty of the Superstition Mountains. And as the sun's going down and y'all are hiking back down to your vehicle, you're talking and just enjoying the scenery, all right? Well, this young man by the name of Khaymen Welch, 25-year-old fella. Him and his uncle did just that. They were up in the Superstitions around Weaver's Needle area, and they were taking pictures, just enjoying their little hike that they were doing. Well, as they were coming down the mountain, they stopped by the vehicle that they were that they had come in on, and the uncle said he needed to get something out of the truck. And as he was walking towards the truck, opens the truck and is kind of looking into the truck and everything, he heard his nephew, Khaymen, say, I'm going to walk up the hill here and take some more pictures of the sunset. And he said, okay. And he kept looking in his truck and everything, and then he turned around and Khaymen was gone. And he didn't think too much of it at first. He's like, he went up the hill. And he's like, all right. So he walked up the hill and he was looking and looking, and he couldn't find him anywhere. Now, Khaymen, he wasn't the type of fella that would just wander away. After about 30 minutes, 45 minutes, Khaymen's uncle got kind of worried. He couldn't find him anywhere. And that was on August 12th of 2020. And they got the searchers out, the whole 9 yards, dogs and helicopters and the whole 9 yards. And Khaymen is still missing to this day. They have not been able to find him. Now, I have looked up some areas online that said they did, but they really didn't, they weren't true that I could figure out. So unfortunately, Khaymen Welch is still missing out there in the desert.
So sad.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Isn't that something, though? He was trying to capture the beauty of the Superstition Mountains. That was the last thing he was trying to do.
Yeah.
And now, never to be seen again, as so many stories go. Wow.
It does out here.
It's also fascinating because you mentioned that they were still trying to find him and finding what they thought was him, but then they weren't sure. And I think that's another thing about the Superstition Mountains, constant confusion.
Right.
Yeah. There are so much confusion, mistaken identities. They found him. They didn't find him. They'll never find him. This could be them. This is allegedly him, but they say it's not.
Right.
I almost wonder if that's part of the curse to make the mysteries unsolvable.
Could be confusion, yeah.
Yeah. And as late as 2020, this man just vanishes seemingly into thin air. And it makes you wonder, is he out there? Is he up on that mountain now? Or is he... It's frightening.
Yeah, we don't know. That's the scary part, is nobody knows. You know, is he still alive? We hope he is. Maybe something happened and he wanted to disappear or something. I mean, hopefully he's still alive, but that's the thing. Nobody knows. Yeah.
It's like the mountain swallows people whole.
It does.
It is, and it's been happening for so long, including people before people lived here, just before there were even settlers, people that were just traveling based off rumors of the gold were finding all kinds of problems and terrifying things and people missing and coming across places that they feel they shouldn't be, to the point of massacres taking place, including the Peraltas.
So in the 1840s, the Peraltas actually owned this land, technically belonged to the Native Americans, but they were a family from northern Mexico. And they would come up to the Superstition Mountains to mine, and then they would go back to Mexico because they couldn't stay very long, and they could only take like one trip up here a year because the Native Americans did not want them on their land. So the Peraltas would come and they would mine gold, and then they'd go back. So at one point in the 1840s, they're on a trip up to the mountain. There's like 200 men, whole like mule train, wagons, whole 9 yards. And the Apaches supposedly slaughtered them. And only a couple survived and made their way back to Mexico, lived to tell the tale. Right. But the Peraltas were the ones who originally found the gold in the mountains. Because, I mean, when it comes to the Spaniards being in America, and especially like in this area, there was like the 7 cities of Cibola, like the rumors of these great cities of gold. And so the Peraltas found their great city of gold in this mountain, and they were slaughtered for it.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So they made a trip there and back, there and back, and then that last one that got a hold of them, they could never get back.
That's the thing. Both in the tales and on the tour, I like to use the word greed. And then sometimes I feel like the mountain knows when you've had enough greed, and it's like, okay, I tried, but now you're mine.
Yeah, and that's what's wild. So many people have like found the mine, or supposedly found the mine, and left, and then when they try to come back, they're mysteriously found dead.
Yeah.
So of course, what would stories of the Superstition Mountains be without the most infamous, the one about Jacob Waltz?
Not long after the Peraltas, actually, Jacob Waltz was in these parts. And there's actually two separate stories that have been told throughout the years as to how he found out about the gold that was out here. One of the stories that people have told is not very interesting, and the other one is a little bit more disturbing. I'll say that much. So the first story actually is that he befriended one of the heirs of the Peraltas that had heard stories from his family, and through that kind of connection, Jacob was able to kind of piece together where the gold was. Interesting, right? Not really. Second story, Jacob actually was working at another mine that was north of here. Many people around these parts will know it as the Vulture Mine in Wickenburg. You and I actually spent a night there. I don't know if it's as haunted as Goldfield, but there were some interesting things that happened that night, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Jacob was actually working at that gold mine when he met a Apache girl named Ken T. And he was significantly older than she was, but, you know, things of the time, she actually became somewhat of a mistress to Jacob. So they had a relationship, and that grew while they were in Wickenburg. And there's rumors that she knew about the gold and told him about it because they were, you know, living in a gold mine. And sure enough, shortly after this kind of conversation happened, Jacob was let go from the Vulture Mine because he had apparently incorrectly graded some ore, and that's a big no-no. So with that in mind, they left the Vulture Mine in Wickenburg and came out here to the Superstition Mountain. So shortly after moving out here, somehow the native Apache in the area learned that Ken T had told Jacob about the location of the gold. There was one night where they were asleep and they were attacked by the Apache and captured, and they were split up, and during this time Ken T had her tongue cut out of her mouth for telling Jacob about this gold. And Jacob never saw her again. He was able to escape that night, go north of here to a town that still exists called Tortilla Flat, where he worked at a saloon and tried to stay as low as possible away from the Apache. So a few years later, in 1877, Jacob was seen bartering in Phoenix, which is at that time 4-hour commute, you know.
By wagon.
You know, it's all the way out there. So there's got to be a good reason for him to go out there and barter, right? And sure enough, he had gold that he was trading for, and people were, you know, looking over their shoulder, where's this guy getting all this gold? And he'd be coming out time and time again with wagonfuls of this gold. There were a few occurrences where people were so suspicious that they tried to follow him back to the Superstition Mountains to find out where he was finding this. And along the way, Jacob knew what was happening. He knew that people were eyeballing him, and he would try to lose them on his way back home. And sure enough, he was able to do just that. So he kept that secret as long as he could. So these trips back and forth to Phoenix lasted till about 1891, and in 1891, a huge flood actually came and wiped out Jacob's homestead, and he almost died during that flood. He was able to get away, and two men noticed what was happening and rescued him from his own homestead, and he was able to find a nurse to help him out, and he actually contracted pneumonia and also suffered a stroke. And the two men that had rescued him and the nurse all knew about Jacob. They all knew that he had some sort of idea of where this gold was. So they would, of course, they're still trying to help him out, but at the same time, they're like, hey, where's that gold at? Other than literally having them go back to his homestead and grab what gold he still had, they couldn't make out what he was saying. He had a stroke. He was not well. And they would go out and take turns trying to look for it. And eventually Jacob did end up passing away from the stroke and from the pneumonia. And the two men that tried to rescue him, they tried time and time again, and they fought over that gold, and they ended up I believe they were brothers actually, and they refused to talk to each other, but they would still separately look for that gold, and nobody could ever find where he had gotten all of that. So from 1877 to 1891, he was pulling gold from the mountain, and nobody knew where. And so that's where the legend of the Lost Dutchman's gold mine comes from.
That he was one of the only men, if not the, among the prospectors to pull gold out of that mountain alone and live to tell about it, as well as getting to die in a deathbed with 4 walls and a roof surrounding him. That was also fascinating.
Yeah, and I guess didn't they found like a huge chunk of the like really pure golden ore underneath his bed.
Yeah,
supposedly.
that's where they found
Yeah.
gold. So when he asked the nurse and the 2 men who would rescue him to go back and grab what he had, and that was exactly where he had it.
Yep.
But it's interesting, we talk about this curse and pulling gold from that mountain. He knew exactly where to go, and it's almost like the mountain silenced him.
There was something interesting about Jacob Waltz and the way he handled it, because most people go in that mountain, they're not coming back. Jacob Waltz was able to get in there and out multiple times, but he did die from unnatural causes, but in his deathbed. And what's also interesting, could the mountain have used him as a weapon against others, because he left behind pieces of maps, supposedly a treasure map of sorts telling you where, and it has brought people to this day as we speak. As we're recording this, there might be people on that mountain using the evidence Jacob Waltz left behind to get in that mountain and try to pull gold out, who may never make it back out. So I wonder, it's almost like, you know what, Jacob, you're pretty good, you're a pretty smart guy. I'm gonna use what you know to lure others and like spread my wrath. Like it's kind of an interesting concept angle at it.
And it's been 150 years or so, and still, that's a legend.
It is.
Despite
and
all that.
The legends of the Lost Dutchman gold mine, I would have to say, is the #1 reason people still to this day search that mountain for gold.
This is anything but a get-rich-quick story. The story of the Lost Dutchman mine and its supposedly limitless stores of gold.
It's full of danger, death, and mystery.
It lives on to this day.
So for centuries, people have been coming to that mountain, looking for gold, and disappearing. Now, sometimes people are also found. They don't all disappear into thin air. But what's interesting is that so many of the people that are found, it's never an open and close case. It's not as simple as we have identified the body as so-and-so. There's always confusion, there's always mystery, and there's downright bizarre rulings. Murders being suicides, and people being found being considered a more natural cause when there's evidence to the contrary. So it's not just disappearances, but that mountain seems to scramble reality in a way, confusing those that work on the cases of the people that perish up that mountain. And that's kind of what this chapter is about, because a lot of people who go up there, a lot of people that go looking for the people that don't come back, who are in search of rather just the scenic view or in gold. Often this, death and blood, is all they ever find.
One of the most infamous cases of strange death in the mountains is Dr. Adolph Ruth. This is 1931. He is a veterinarian, and he has a son who was in the Mexican-American War. During this war, his son saved the life of a Mexican officer. This Mexican officer was like eternally grateful, and so he gave him some maps. These are like lost maps from the Peraltas and stuff like that. And so Dr. Ruth's son gives them to his dad and is like, hey, found this stuff, like, I thought you might like it. So Dr. Ruth is an adventurous guy, so he starts trying to follow these maps. And what's funny is that the trip to the Superstition Mountains isn't actually his first trip that he took based off of these maps. He took one to California where he almost died. He broke his leg and had to be rescued. And literally, like, the man could have died and then never ended up in the Superstition Mountains because of this. But June 1931 rolls around. He decides that he's going to the Superstition Mountains to track down the Lost Ducthman mine. He is going on a 2-week trip. He goes out. 2 weeks go by. He's not back. Search party goes out to find him. They don't find anything. Later that year, in December, there's a team of archaeologists that are going up the mountain to, you know, do a dig, explore like the Native American ruins and stuff like that. And they find a skull. A skull with 2 bullets through its brain. The skull completely detached from the body. So they end up discovering that this is Dr. Ruth's body. And his campsite, all of his belongings are found 3/4 of a mile away. So they rule the death as suicide because he had the same type of gun as the bullets in his brain. But somehow he managed to shoot himself twice and decapitate himself with how he shot. So, not exactly great.
And the head rolls a quarter of a...
Exactly, yeah. And what's even more wild is that his gun is found with his belongings 3/4 of a mile away.
Right.
While exploring his campsite, they find a checkbook. And in the checkbook, there's a note. The note says that he found the mine. And at the bottom, it says, Veni, Vidi, Vici. That means I came, I saw, I conquered. But at the end of the day, the mountain conquered him.
Crazy.
Sure did. Wow.
That's crazy.
That's what I'm saying, like, there's so much evidence that those who seek the gold, those who lay eyes on the gold, perish. And then your death, even if found, lies as a mystery. Mm-hmm. It remains a mystery that seems unsolvable.
Yep.
2 bullets in the head.
Decapitated himself
from
somehow,
a gun that
from
was
shooting himself.
3/4 of a mile away.
3/4 of a mile away,
Yeah.
and fully loaded.
And fully loaded.
No bullets were missing from the gun. Yeah.
In the southwestern United States, near Phoenix, Arizona, is a brooding, mysterious wilderness known as Superstition Mountain, and haunted by the ghost of all who have gone before. They move in the vast, silent stillness of the evil superstition, beckoning others to follow. There is a curse on this gold, a curse that lingers over these mountains. Everyone who has searched for it, seen it, or touched it is marked for a horrible death. Yet the superstition continues to lure men and women to search for the Dutchman's gold. Their bleached bones and beheaded bodies are later found in the treacherous cliffs and canyons of the mountain.
Now, one thing that is often interesting about the curse, a lot of people, even experts, They say searching for the gold isn't what kills you, it's laying eyes on the gold that kills you. Ruth claimed to have seen the gold. However, this might not always be the case, as an example that you're going to share with us.
Yeah, that's a very true statement. Yeah, a man by the name of Abraham Thorne. A few years before Adolph and Ruth, when the Americans out here in the West, they had a military base just north of here, and Abraham Thorne, he was a doctor at that base. But not only was he a doctor for Americans and people stationed there, but if there were any Apache in the area, he would also, donate his services and help them out. So there was a period of time where there was a bad eye infection that was going around, and I believe there were 3 to 4 Apache people that had an eye infection, and he helped treat that. And the Apache saw that as a sign of good faith, and they really appreciated that. And so they made a deal with Abraham. They said, hey, we know where gold is in this mountain. We don't want people out here, stealing it from us, but you did us a favor. So we're going to show you, more or less, where some of this gold is. So what they did was they blindfolded him and walked him out on a wagon, 20 to 30 miles. They took the blindfold off, and he was able to see briefly where he was for getting a bit of gold. Enough that would probably last him for the rest of his life. But Abraham, he had other things in mind. Not too long after he was able to get that gold, he told a few friends about it, and he said, I was blindfolded on my way out there, but I was able to get a little bit of a good look around, and I think I might be able to get back out there. There's a lot more to be discovered. So sure enough, he and his friends gathered their wagons, expecting to go out and find more gold. But he never came back. They were all killed. So, not sure how it happened. Nobody has documented exactly how they were killed, but this is a man that was able to get gold from the mountain, be blindfolded, and it was a gift by the Apache to get this gold. And yet it wasn't enough for him. He went back for that second time, kind of like the Peraltas.
It's greed.
It's really
greed. I'm wondering if maybe something about the mountain enhances that in people.
Yeah, I actually found a couple separate stories of people who, one that stood out in particular is these 2 men found gold. It was actually pyrite, but they didn't know that. And they got in a fight over it, and one of them killed the other, and they were friends.
Wow.
But that greed, drives people crazy.
Could be part of the curse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of makes you wonder how sinister the mountain is. Like, it's not just, oh, you did wrong. It's almost like it calls to you, like by name, like a foreboding in the wind. Like,
yep.
Right.
That gold fever times whatever,
Yeah, because people come from the world all over. In fact, I hear all the time here in town, people literally ask me so, how easy is it to hike that mountain? Where?
Yeah, it depends on which trail and what you're looking for.
Yeah, because there are trails. You can hike it, but it depends where you're at. But it's recommended to know what you're getting into, but it also, your intentions.
Yep.
You go in there with the wrong intent.
Yeah, I've taken my kids hiking during the daytime, but I don't think I'm
It's a gorgeous mountain. It's one of Arizona's landmarks. It's stunning. It takes a certain kind of person to wake up in the morning, grab your gear, and decide, I'm going to trek that mountain, and I'm going to pull gold out from it. But even having said that, there aren't a lot of guys like one man by the name of Elijah Rivas. This guy might have given the mountain a run for its money, which is also why his end is also shrouded in a bit of mystery too, giving 2 versions of how his story ends. Kind of like you said earlier, 2 versions of Jacob Waltz's story. Rivas got 2 versions, and I will give them both. But firstly, I want to introduce you to Elijah Rivas. the Hermit of the Superstition Mountain, some call him. He was also known as White Devil and the Madman. Now, I often said, looking into his eyes, this guy is the Charles Manson of the 1800s. People were terrified of this man. You go up in the mountains, you see him coming at you, you know.
I'm going the other way.
Yeah, you're more afraid of the mountain, you're afraid of him. Mm-hmm. But here's the twist. It could have all been a persona put on by Revis. Because there are definitely two sides to the man. The man that wanted you to be afraid of him, and then the really intelligent, soft-spoken man that only a few got to know. Now, he was tough as nails, don't get me wrong there. When I said he'd give the mountain a run for his money, I'm completely serious. But I'm gonna back up a little bit and explain a little bit about this really unique man who I really wanted to talk to, because when it comes to all the different prospectors that have gone up that mountain, there's something about Revis that I connect with, that he becomes kind of like my favorite, and I'm gonna talk about that right now.
No, Matt, I understand why he's your favorite. You guys have some resemblance I could see, actually.
Grow a beard.
Yeah. Just cover that mouth up.
No, he looks like a straight metalhead, you're right.
That's right. Yeah.
No, but this is the thing. The madman of the superstitions, that man that has that death glare in his eye that looks like it could eat your soul, was an extremely calm, intelligent, really educated man. He was a teacher, he was a professor, and the only reason he even prospected in the first place, he got bored of teaching. He wanted something more action-oriented. Now, so he literally was a prospector out of boredom, but he didn't just immediately cut loose to Arizona. He was actually in California. Now, in California, he would often travel to Arizona because of stories of gold, and throughout the 1860s, he would go back and forth between Arizona and California. But here's the thing. He sucked. He was really bad at prospecting. So he would tag along with people, and they would just be like, you know what? Maybe you should go back to California. Fine, I will. People in California, hey, have you tried Arizona? And like, he would travel back out to Arizona, and, you know, and he didn't really find much luck until the 1870s, when he would wind up at the Vulture Mine. The Vulture Mine was a place to be, and who knows, there's probably a chance that he ran into Jacob. And yeah, so he had a little more luck in the Vulture Mine, but not so much that he was getting wealthy. So he needed a real job. So what he wound up doing was, he also loved horses, and he was very good at breaking in horses. So he actually got hired by the U.S. Army in the latter 1870s to travel out and ride horses with them, break horses with them, train horses, prepare horses for military. And this brought him to the Arizona territory. He saw the mountain, he heard the stories of gold, and he's like, really? That sounds perfect. But they're like, no, 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 that's dangerous. You don't want to go up there. But this is Elijah Revis. The calm persona, yeah, but he also was kind of a badass. And so he's like, I can do it. So what he winds up doing, he winds up hiking up the mountain and actually building himself like a cabin. And he names the territory around it the Revis Valley. So he's got himself a name of the land, and he's doing his thing mining gold, and he's just living that way, and occasionally makes money with the army. But then the Apaches get wind of him, and the Apaches are like, we can't have this guy just living here doing what he pleases. Because a lot of prospectors, they would get gold, they would leave. Not Elijah. He took root. The Apaches, they didn't like that. So one night, about 8 or 9 Apaches, they sneak out to that cabin, and they see a little faint glow in the window, and they're like, all right, he's in there. It's like 9 of us against 1 old man. We've got this. So they go up, they're creeping, and apparently there's like this little creek bed or something. They're crossing over that. I don't know if there was water in it, or if like what caused them to be heard, but he heard it. Loads up a rifle, comes out, fires, gets 3 of them right off the bat. The others, and they run and they're scared and they go and they hide. And they're like, oh man, we're dealing with like a real deal. They're like, well, we can live off the land. He's got to come out at some point. So they set up camp and they just wait on the other side of that creek, waiting for Elijah to have to come out of his house. Several days go by and he hasn't come out, but he realizes he needs to. So what's he gonna do? He can see them camping. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. He's like, all right, I have no choice. I'm gonna have to turn the tables psychologically. He gets naked.
That'll do it.
Yep. One way to go about it.
Yep.
What's scarier than a
Now
crazy man?
he's already got the beard that you
Naked
saw in the
crazy
picture.
man.
He's already got the scary eyes. Puts on a hat, gets naked, straps 2 guns around his naked waist, opens the door and steps out. They see him and they're just like, what is this? He just sprints, I am the White Devil! And just starts sprinting, "Ah!" and just screams, and they're like, get the hell out of here! And so these guys, they jump on horses, they scramble, they're running. He's like, get out of here! And just like, this bearded Charles Manson naked dude is just sprinting towards him, screaming, I am the White Devil! And like, they run. And they tell their friends, don't mess with Elijah Rivas, that guy's crazy. So he develops name White Devil, and they left him alone. So Elijah Rivas now has Elijah Valley and nobody messes with him. He gets to stay there and farm and mine and nobody is messing with him. And every once in a while he would still walk around naked just to show him who's boss. You know?
Oh, yeah.
Just to remind him, hey, legends are
still
true.
crazy.
I'm that guy. So that happens. But this is also where the madman comes into the reputation, because it wouldn't just be the Apaches, but there was the towns nearby, other people that lived around the mountain, like at the foot of it, people, other settlers and encampments, and the people that were in the military. All of them said, hey, have you heard about the madman? And then some people were afraid of him, but there were a few that understood. He would farm, he would go down, he would trade in nearby towns, and that's how he made most of his living, by trading, farming, food supplies, things like that. He raised cattle and horses and things, and so he had himself a pretty comfortable life. And something that was cool is he would occasionally still go in and teach things. He was extremely educated, and something that Chloe might appreciate, he was actually the first man in the state of Arizona to own a library in his home. And it was full of very highly educated, sought after books by English professors and math professors and those that were into history and social studies and things like that. He was a happy, educated man who would only use that crazy madman thing to scare people away if he had to. It was also, he was very respectful to ladies. He was so respectful to ladies, he would never enter a home with a woman in it without asking permission. If you were lost or needed help and knocked on his door, he would let you in and give you all the food he had, even if it was his last. He would give it to his guest. This is the kind of man he was. So he lived 2 lifestyles, which is one of the reasons he's also one of my favorites. He's just this persona of duality that is so misunderstood. Today, more people know him as the madman because they're not knowing it. That's the more amazing reputation. But the thing is, of course, this wouldn't be much of a story about Legends of the Superstitions if it didn't have, you know, a grimy end. Now, unfortunately, 1896, so for a couple, like 20 years or so, he lives up in that cabin. But it was until 1896 that friends of his noticed he's no longer coming around. And there was one man that had dealings with him in Mesa. He was supposed to have an appointment to meet with him in Mesa, and he was a friend of his, both business and personal. And when he didn't show up one day in Mesa, he's like, okay, I have to go look for him. They went up there, or he went up there, and nobody's home. And he's like, okay, something's wrong. This isn't like Elijah Rivas. So a few people, if I'm not mistaken, a few people go out over the next week looking for him. Well, they found him about 4 miles from his home, decapitated. And I mentioned two versions of the story. There's two versions, which also adds into the confusion of that mountain's stories being confused with natural causes and things like that. And the tame version is that he died of some sort of natural cause, and then animals scattered his remains. But the other version that most people will talk about, and that a lot of people, his friends and stuff, would say, 4 miles away from his home, his headless body was found. But then, about 10 yards away from that, his head was mounted on a rock, staring down at his corpse. I doubt animals did that. Yeah. Now that's the version that most people go by. Now the other thing that's cool is him being respected by his friends. He was buried up there, and as we speak, Elijah Rivas has a grave marker up on that mountain. And I wish I could say the cabin was still there, because it was.
Ruins
no,
are,
it was.
I believe the ruins are still there.
They took it down.
They did? Oh, man.
Past few years, I forget why. Someone bought the rights to it and had it. They, if I'm not mistaken, recently took it down, which I think is tragic. I would have loved to have visited it. But the grave marker's still there, so... Future Fear Frontier episode.
Let's go see it.
Yeah, wow. I would love to go find camping. That grave marker. But that's the story of Elijah Rivas.
With all that said, I just can't stop getting a picture of him sitting in a nice armchair with a pipe, reading a book, completely naked, 2 guns on the hip. But wow, yeah, I think that picture just epitomizes both personas.
Yeah, he's a fascinating character.
It's so wild too, because, you know, most of these people are in the mountains for a short amount of time. They supposedly find gold or whatever, and then they die. He lived up there for 20 years.
Yeah.
What killed him? You know, like, if you think about it, like, did he find the mine and
why that
something
day?
Took him out? Why that day? Why after 20 years?
He found something he wasn't supposed to find, maybe.
Yeah. It's wild.
Because if the Apache were, you know, quote unquote, afraid of him for that long, if it was them, what gave at that point?
Yeah, I know. And no one knows, because he was alone.
Right.
He just didn't show up one day, like, we need to go look for him. It's a mystery. That's why he does too belong in these legends of the Superstition Mountain.
Really chilling.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, terrifying, and these stories, I mean, they go back hundreds of years, but not all of them. Throughout the decades, I mean, Ruth was in the 1930s. Michael's story was in 2020. But there's all kinds of stories throughout the decades, including the 1950s. There were several infamous cases, including, I believe you know one from 1952, correct?
So yeah, in 1952, there were 3 separate people that were either found missing or took a while for them to be found. A man by the name of Joseph Kelly, he went out to the Superstition Mountains to find gold, and nobody could find him for 2 years before his body was found, shot, similar to Adolph Ruth. But later that same year, 2 others named Ross Blay and Charles Harshberger, they went out to find gold, and they were never found. So that was, you know, in the 50s, and nobody knows what happened to them. And I believe in the same decade, Chloe, you have a couple or somebody as well?
Yeah. Well, who they were is still unknown. But in 1958, the campsite was discovered, unoccupied, completely abandoned. All of their belongings were there. No one knows who the campsite belonged to, and the only proof of these people that they ever found was the bed sheets in their camp were covered in blood. And what's weird about it too is that there were letters, there was mail, and the address had been ripped out of every single one.
Often, and things are so random, nobody knows, so all of these things could be connected, but we don't know.
No, it's true, and like we've been saying, I swear it scrambles the way it scrambles reality, it seems to, almost. And what's also extremely fascinating is we were talking about stories about, a lot of the times these bodies are found with gold on them. So murder, whatever, why aren't they taking the gold?
Yeah, it's not theft. It's not theft isn't the thing.
So it could just be downright insanity.
Yep.
The mountain is like, yeah,
made them insane.
kill each other, but leave that gold behind. And it's like, if gold is what you're after, why is there gold on this corpse?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is, and it's terrifying, as is the mountain itself and the desert around it. It's, as we've said, it's not just the mountain that's cursed, but it's the desert, because the mountain sort of has this lure to draw people in with all its stories of gold and legends and how unique and downright beautiful this mountain is. But the whole desert is cursed, and supposedly, whether you die within this desert or within that mountain, you are never leaving again, one world or the next. So the entire desert is haunted to this very day. So seeing as many stories as there are. Uh-oh. It seems Fear Frontier, the podcast, is experiencing some technical difficulties. Or maybe the ghosts of this haunted brothel are just acting up again. For the next few moments, the audio in this section of the podcast will unfortunately not sound quite right, as our golden voices will be recorded from the camera instead of the microphones. This issue gets resolved very shortly. Thank you, and stay tuned for the episode's conclusion. And now, as many stories as there are of legends of gold and people vanishing from the face of the earth, there are also endless ghost stories surrounding that mountain. The Superstition Mountains and the desert around it are haunted. It seems as if stories also come from within the mountain. Now, we say that the thunder god of the mountain guards a portal to hell, but I've also heard some people say that beneath this hell or within is also a purgatory. Perhaps some of these people are going there. It's also interesting because another story would also be within in the cliffs, Skull Cave. There is a cave over Canyon Lake on the other side of the mountain from where we are that looks like a skull. Years ago, an Apache family was being chased, and they decided to climb up, because they knew the mountain, climb up and hide in Skull Cave. Well, the men that were chasing them, were they soldiers?
I think they were the soldiers, yeah.
Soldiers, yes. They were looking to capture them dead or alive, but since they were up in that cave, these men knew that these natives knew the mountain more than they did. So instead of chasing up there and maybe meeting their own demise, they simply aimed their weapons up at the roof of Skull Cave, opened fire over and over and over, enough that eventually the bullets ricocheting from the roof came down and landed on those that were hunkered down in the cave, and it killed every single one of them. Who knows how many shots that took, but they all perished. And to this day, if you're sailing down Canyon Lake, because it kind of narrows into a sort of cavern with walls around it, going beneath Skull Cave, they say you'll still hear their frightened screams echoing from the mouth of Skull Cave, which is terrifying. And I've even heard some people say you can hear the bullets firing. And some people that have bravely ventured in there, even to this day, when they dig and things, they can actually still find shells, bullets.
We're going to have to go investigate. We're going to camp.
I would be very interested in
We're
going
going to go
into that
camping.
cave.
Absolutely. That's less than a half hour of
Yeah, that's right over there. Yeah.
Yep. So there are interesting stories. Now, what's also interesting is it was natives that died in that case. Now, you hear their cries. is the mountain mourning with those that perished in Skull Cave? I mean, do we hear the cries of the hikers and the prospectors? Would Elijah Rivas be crying out there? But it's interesting. Maybe it has a sympathetic perspective on those that perish, that are not part of the curse, that are not part of those that are not supposed to be there. But it's also fascinating because there's so many mysteries surrounding things like that, including the time that you and I and several others actually ventured out up Highway 88, which is the highway also known as the Apache Trail. It winds and travels past the town of Goldfield, up past the mountain, up through Tortilla Flats, and over to Canyon Lake where Skull Cave is. Now, one night, I'm sure a lot of you viewers are familiar with an app known as Randonautica. Well, Michael and I, and several others, one night, we decided to put Randonautica to the test, and we all met out in the desert with 2 vehicles, 2 trucks, and we ran the Randonautica app, and then we decided, hey, we're going to focus our intent. In case you don't know what it is, you think of an intention while running the app, and the app focuses on your intentions, and supposedly we'll pick a destination for you on a map, and you can GPS to it and find something related to what your intent is. So rational, sane people would think of things like money, wealth, or something that's going to brighten their day. Well, that's not us. We're Fear Frontiers, so we focused on something dead. We want to find something dead. That was our intent. Something dead. So we run the app, focus our intent, something dead. It gives us a marker, we GPS, and it takes us up Highway 88, past the town of Goldfield.
Now let me give you a little thing.
Mountain.
It is storming this night.
It is storming.
Raining, thunder, lightning,
It is true, and it wasn't until we got on the road, I'm like, let's do this, and then all of a sudden, all right, let's go.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, we, remember you were driving, we were sitting with you, and I was sitting in the back of the truck.
Yeah, I think you and
like
Kim
the
and them were in the
GPS,
back,
and,
yeah.
and our friends were out there, and we were planning on finding something because we were armed. You were armed. I had a machete. Tim had an axe, a hatchet. We were ready to throw down.
Any type of weapon.
So what we do is we drive up there. Now you can't just go anywhere. It's a skinny little 2-lane highway that winds up the road. So we get up there, and we're like, well, now what? So we decide to park and get out. So we're walking through, and we're going through cliffs. I remember you went to a cliff edge, and you just looked down. And I'm like,
hopping on the rocks.
Yeah, and I remember.
You have a really weird thing with cliff edges, huh, Mike?
Yeah, he didn't learn much.
Yeah.
Now, I remember being like, Michael, get off the cliff. You're going to become a Randonautica story yourself. I remember saying that, and then I remember someone else being like, well, it said already dead, so maybe you can't die unless you're separate from the story. But as we're walking around, I'm like, all right, already dead. And like, it's starting to rain. We're out there in the middle of the mountains ourselves, and it's raining. Thank God we didn't say gold. But we decided to run a spirit box. Now, I remember I was the one holding the spirit box, and it was very strange. I remember, I don't know if this is supernatural or not, but every time static from that spirit box would emerge, there was this moth that would fly around and land on my hand or the spirit box.
Yeah, because I think I remember videotaping.
Yeah, because we have it on video, and I handed it to someone else, and then the moth lands on their wrist every time, and it's like, I don't know what this moth has to do. Maybe that means nothing, but it kind of put us in this spiritual, paranormal vibe. And then I get the spirit box, and I'm like, we're looking for something dead. Is there something or someone dead? And I'm telling you, dude, that static. Andy. And I'm like, Andy? What's the name Andy? And I tell him, like, I think I got the name Andy. Now, we have it on video, but it's hard to hear the name. You hear the static, and you see my reaction. I'm like, it just said Andy. We continue forward. It's starting to rain harder and harder. Hoodies up and coats. And I'm like, it's getting very cold. we're like, maybe we should get back up to the road, at least and start walking back where the car is at. The cars are at. We get up on that road, and all of a sudden that spirit box just goes crazy and then just stops. Like, what was that? And I turn. There's a grave marker on the side of the road, a little cross. The name on it is Andy. We've got it on video.
Yep.
I'll show it.
Yep.
Wow.
And then moments later, we discovered a grave. The name on the grave was Andy. And we were like, now this is interesting. And then, the moth still flying around. And Michael and I are loving it, but those that were with us might have been kind of creeped out. They're like, let's go back to the cars. And we did. But it was a very somber, strange night. Mm-hmm. And Randonautica is sort of fascinating itself. In fact, we've talked about using it again, but Randonautica, like the mountain, the storm, the spirit box, the moth, the grave marker with the accurate name, I think we left a little too prematurely. I want to know the end of that story.
I'd like to go back and see if we can maybe do another spirit box around that.
People that are more brave and like-minded, perhaps.
Let's do it. Yeah, there's not a lot of stories out there where all of those blocks kind of just fall into place.
Yeah, and we had used Randonautica before,
right?
And it sent us to places that we had already been, or that one time we were going down that one, and that guy popped out, "Hey, this is not a party place."
That was hilarious.
That,
that was funny.
That's where it can get dangerous.
So yeah,
some guy, we didn't even see him. He was a voice from the darkness.
Yeah.
We were down there. He was up on a hill. Hey, this isn't a place to party. And I was like, what did I say? I'm like, we're not trying to party. We're
trying to turn
lost.
around.
We're trying to turn around. Get out of here. And like, it was, I was just waiting for the...
I know, right?
But the thing is, though, you touched on something just a moment ago. Oh, places we've already been. Mm-hmm. Yes, what do you do about that? Like, Randonautica, show us something scary. Okay. It's like, we've been there. That's where we work. Or that's where we explore. Oh, that's where we investigate. I'm like, we're investigating places that Randonautica sends people, which in and of itself is terrifying and fascinating.
True.
So it is. It makes me wonder what else is nearby that we can find, or how many people are using it and finding us.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
Randonautica told us about Fear Frontier.
That would be funny. People at Randonautica, it's that green bordello up on the hill. Like, meanwhile, we're all like in here like, but now,
And we have even more breaking news right now. The wreckage of a plane crash is burning on the side of the Superstition Mountains east of Phoenix. Right now, it is just not clear what kind of plane went down in this area. There are no immediate reports of any missing commercial aircraft, but you can see that fireball in the footage right there. Rescue crews are having a really tough time getting to the crash site because of all...
So these stories are all extremely frightening, but they're also real. We're not just telling stories for the sake of scary stories. These aren't campfire stories. These are real stories about real people, including one that I'm going to discuss now that I'm going to tell you up front. I did not personally know the people in the story, but I know people that knew them. I want to very respectfully share a piece of information involving these mountains that happened Thanksgiving 2011. There was two families celebrating Thanksgiving out here by the Superstition Mountains in the town of Apache Junction, which is the town at the foot of the Superstition Mountains, and one of them owned a plane, and they thought it would be fun to take kids out, fly through the mountains at night. Memorable Thanksgiving. I don't know what happened. I don't know how, but somehow that plane ran into that mountain. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Like
Over here
up there.
somewhere.
Interesting.
Bordello's listening. But somehow, that plane, with all passengers, including several kids, hit the mountain, exploded into flames. Everybody died. Now, like I said, I did not know them personally, but I know people that knew them. We have friends that know them. We have co-workers that knew them. You can still see the burn on the side of the mountain where that plane hit to this day. It's supposed to be a fun, memorable, family-oriented time, but that night, several lives were taken, and people ran out of their homes to see the mountain on fire. Fire trucks racing down Highway 88. And it's tragic. The reason I bring it up tonight, not to make light of it, but according to these legends and these stories, everybody that would perish in one way or another is supposedly kept here. Now, people can believe what they want to believe. I'm not telling people what's real or not real, what to believe or what not to believe. A tragedy happened, and that's what happened. But I do want to share a photograph that can be interpreted in any way. But there is a YouTube channel. Now, first of all, this photo, I'm not saying what's real or what isn't, because this isn't my photo. I'm actually, from this point on, quoting other people entirely. I just wanted to share their finding. There's a YouTube channel called Bedtime Stories. And they tell scary stories that are supposedly mostly true. There's even an episode about the Superstition Mountains. In that story, when they talk about the mountains, there was a man who went hiking who knew very little about the Superstition Mountains. Him and his friends just simply went hiking one day. Now, they took pictures of themselves and laughing and having a good time, and that's all there was to it. But this man, I believe his name is Nethaniel, when he got home, he simply handed his camera to his mother and said, "Hey, yeah, look at our pictures." And she noticed something that none of them noticed, which I'm going to share. Now, before I share it, remember, it could be nothing. I might be looking too into it, but then again, this was their photo, not mine, but I did find it interesting. This is just them having a good time, but what they didn't notice, the man behind them, appearing in all white, that his mother said looks like they're burnt in the face. This picture is taken right beneath the crash site. Might mean nothing. And I'm not saying that that's what this is. This is Nethaniel's story. But it, as we speak about legends and paranormal stories about a mountain that's supposedly cursed, it's just one more piece of evidence to the mystery that there might be something behind the curse, this mountain, and the Apaches that said stay away from it, that very few people over the centuries have listened to. So,
It's pretty crazy.
any thoughts on the picture?
No, that looks exactly what you're
It's chilling.
describing. Yeah, it looks like he's wearing a headband or something on his head, potentially.
Could be
Looks like a hat. Like a
pilot
baseball cap.
maybe, for a pilot.
Possibly.
Could be.
Yeah. I admit I haven't looked too much deeper into it because I wanted to keep respect and just leave it as their story.
Absolutely.
But
And it provides a very serious sense of realism. Like you said, we are telling these stories of real people, and it it can hit home at any point. And it, I don't think
it's our way of keeping their memories alive too.
That's
I guess
true.
You could say.
But with all that said, I don't think these stories are ending anytime soon. You know?
No. The new ones occur every year. As I said, this week the choppers have been flying around that mountain at least 3 times.
Yep.
People will still hike it. People will still look for that legendary Lost Dutchman's gold. And, yeah. And we ourselves, we tour and talk about it every night. So,
Yeah, we do.
So odd, all episode long. I just keep thinking of the quote, when you look into the abyss also looks into you. And I feel like that's the mountain. When people go out to that mountain to explore, to search, they're stepping into something that just swallows them whole.
Another dimension, maybe. Who knows? Reality of they could still be wandering around trying to get out completely alive, but in a total another dimension.
We've even taken walks at night where car accidents have occurred.
Yeah.
Right when you said another dimension, it sounded like somebody was walking right behind you.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mark that 2 or 3 for the episode.
Interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting what happens there, but it's true. We've even taken walks at night where car accidents have taken place and stuff, and we've wondered, are they here? Are they here looking back? Are they scared? Are they new? Are they looking around at the darkness on the mountain, wondering where they are, how they got there? Are they going to be able to leave? It's a terrifying thought. So rather you believe in the paranormal or not, rather you believe in curses or not, the history that we're talking about, the people in these stories, they're real. Beyond that, you can believe what you'd like to believe. We just wanted to present evidence of things, history, names, places that are real, that take place in these very mountains that are in our own backyard. Or perhaps we are in theirs. From Fear Frontier, good night.